So now we're going to move on to the PhD and early career researchers presentations. And we've got 10 minutes for each of them. So I'm going to introduce, so the first one we have is by Nalu and Hamani, and this is looking at hashtag grief journey, narrating grief in 60 seconds on TikTok. Give you a little bit of a bio. So Nalu is a PhD candidate at the University of British Columbia's School of Information. Her research explores the impact of social media platforms used for mourning and memorial practices and the regulatory and theoretical discourses surrounding the digital dignity of the dead. Hamani is an RMIT PhD candidate exploring the interconnectedness of grief in the broader milieu of influences and social media cultural discourses, particularly TikTok. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Larissa. Thank you for that kind introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Nilu, and my wonderful colleague Himani and I are so grateful to be here today among so many incredible scholars and that we admire and that we're able to share our work with. So since our time is so short, I'll be the one presenting our presentation, which we've titled hashtag Grief Journey, Narrating Grief in 60 Seconds on TikTok. Essentially, this presentation is a mix of both of our doctoral research as well as a bit of a teaser for a study that we're working on together. I'm going to draw here first from a recent article that my supervisor, Dr. Jennifer Douglas, and I just published, where we explored how TikTok is emerging as a space for intimate first-person narratives of grief and how these digital narratives are reshaping traditional mourning practices. So we situated TikTok within the broader historical and sociological context of digitally mediated grief expression. And as death, dying, and bereavement scholars have long argued, there is an inherent human need to ritualize loss and to memorialize the deceased. However, unlike traditional offline rituals that are confined to specific times and places, digitally mediated mourning provides a always available online arena for individuals to share their grief. On TikTok, we can observe how users combine photos, videos, voice, text, and music to convey the immediacy and complexity of their loss. This format allows for a dynamic interplay between personal expression and audience engagement. It demonstrates a process of continual self-expression, where each post is a moment in a larger unfolding narrative of grief. Our research sought to understand how these narratives are constructed, how they diverge from digital forms of mourning, and what implications they have for understanding public grief in the digital age. So we collected and analyzed content tagged with the hashtag grief journey to identify some emerging narrative conventions. What we found was that these conventions are inherently more intimate than earlier social media expressions of grief. For instance, some content creators have a series they refer to as grief diaries, where they treat the platform as a digital diary, documenting their grief in real time. We see them at home or in their car, they're facing the camera, directly addressing viewers, and they often cry. These grief diaries reflect an evolving practice of diary writing, which has migrated online in different forms, including through blogging, microblogging, and vlogging on other platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. However, TikTok creates some key differences because the increased sense of intimacy created by the video medium contributes to that tension between privacy and publicity, which has always been an aspect of diary writing, but that operates on a very different scale in the highly public realm of TikTok. Another convention is the integration of digital remains of the dead into new content. Creators incorporate photographs, voice recordings, or video clips of their deceased loved ones into their post. This practice is less about ritualistic remembrance and more about constructing a continued social presence for the departed, essentially maintaining a bond through the digital reassembly of the deceased, or essentially bringing their dead onto TikTok to co-create content. We also notice that grief is often communicated through TikTok trends. For instance, in the last example, repeated refrains such as very demure, very mindful, in this context, not only affirms the creator's participation in the trend, but also subverts conventional expectations of how grief should be displayed. Thinking about this has prompted us to consider the contrast between decentralized and centralized mourning spaces. Traditional platforms like Facebook often provide fixed, enduring memorial pages where grief is collectively channeled. As Elaine Casket notes, these spaces are characterized by a centralization of mourning practices, profiles of the deceased, dedicated memorial groups, and ritualized sharing of memories in a relatively static form. By contrast, TikTok is inherently decentralized. Here, each post is a fleeting, self-curated narrative that exists independently, yet collectively contributes to digitally mediated grief practices. On TikTok, grief centers around the content creator. They create, curate, and share the experience of grief, as well as a narrative of the life and death of the deceased loved one. It's their experience of loss that we are called to witness. And it's at this juncture that we explore the phenomenon of grief influencers and then discuss how they shape online discourses of grief. So our current study examines the content of a TikTok grief influencer named Kate Grange. The majority of her content begins with, "My dad killed my mom at the end of 2019, and for the last few years, I've been rotting away." Most of her content displays the same chain of day-to-day activities that she does while her voiceover reads a poetic script narrating her experience of grief. While TikTok allows longer time frames, her content is usually no longer than 60 seconds. Researchers suggest that influencers often move away from the picture-perfect content and towards more personalized disclosures for elevated visibility and intention. And in this context of what we observe, we term this aspect as the virality of the mundane, where grief influencers perform routine activities in domestic settings to achieve intimacy with their viewers. In our study, we explore not just this notion of the mundane, but as well as themes of grief that resonate with the audience. For instance, in the context of Kate Grange's content, the term "let's not rot" as a grief vernacular. We have observed that many of her viewers have adopted this phrase or even just the word "rot" as a way of expressing their own grief. This is visible in comments like, "I've been rotting for 5 years," or comments thanking her for giving them permission to rot. We also examine how grief content brings a reflective pause in users' passive TikTok consumption and serves as a counterbalance to that incessant flow of information on the platform. We note that this pause can prompt users, especially those who are grieving, to follow the influencer and to engage more deeply with content that offers them empathy and enables them to derive meaning out of the meaninglessness of their loss. So Himani and I are very much looking forward to sharing more with you on this. Stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, thank you, everyone. Thanks so much. And please do get in touch. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Nalu, and thank you, Himani. Now, what we're going to be doing is we're just going to be going through all the presentations now, and then at the end, we'll open up for question time. So once again, I want to remind the audience that you can put in the Q&A there, any questions that any points that you'd like to the speakers to further elaborate on, and we will come to them at the end of this session. So next we have Sharon Greenfield, who will be presenting Grief Spaces for Young People in the Age of Politics of Wellbeing. So Sharon is an anthropologist specializing in young people and bereavement in grief studies. She is a member of the Digital Ethnography Research Centre at RMIT Melbourne, Australia. Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you so much, Larissa. And thank you everyone else for being here today. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, well, first off, my name is Sharon Greenfield, and I'm an anthropologist that specializes in digital media and grief studies. I'm on the board of the Australian Death Studies Society, and I coordinate a death and dying course here in the medical school at one of our universities. So I began looking at kind of my work, looking at grief responses in spaces like, originally it was Instagram, during my PhD. And then I've since added platforms such as TikTok. I think today I'm going to discuss this concept of grief spaces and for young people in the age of politics and well-being, because we have here in Australia, which is the first one put forward in the globally, is this ban for TikTok for 16 and under. And I'll go further into it. But in my experiences and in my research of young people and their uses of digital media, it's viewed as a pivotal place for reflection and identity formation. Boyd and Livingston have both looked into that. And various platforms in the building of human relationships have enabled the online expression, including during the bereavement process. I'd say digital media has also become a place for grief expression by young people beyond what it was intentionally originally, where it was mostly adults. So I'm now looking at grievers on TikTok and the way they express identity, and looking at the politics of grief, how it becomes more encumbered when a government shuts down access to grieving spaces. So in Australia in 2024, the government passed a bill to ban young people under 16 from social media platforms such as Instagram and TikTok. And I begin to think about what happens when bereaved young people no longer have access to a platform that has been a facilitator in their grieving. Older teenagers have found identity through what Livingston calls identity as display. And they find they put more value into who they're connected with and how many others they're connected with, more so than the elaborateness of their display itself. And then now the digital ecosystem that they create and whom they bring into that ecosystem then reflects back onto them on the ways that they value their identity creation. Use of digital media by young people is viewed as a pivotal place for reflection and identity formation. And again, Boyd and Livingston have gone into that. But when a young person goes online during grief, the bereavement is often a function of encouraging remembrance and the memory of the deceased. One of the main reasons that young people engage in digital expression is a way to show agency. They do it for control on an everyday basis when choosing who to connect with online and how to express their identity. Maybe it's they're now motherless or fatherless, or they're called the girl whose mother has died, right, in quotes. One of my previous research participants put it that way. So when they're choosing who to connect with online and how and when to grieve, it's all about choice and control. Now here in Australia, you all know, well, TikTok globally is one of the platforms that young people use for agency, expression, and community. In 2024, the Australian government moved to pass a ban of the use of TikTok and other platforms for those under the age of 16 as a result of consultation with its security agencies and intelligence and a few other organizations. The bill, it's called the Online Safety Amendment, Social Media Minimum Age Bill, has multitude of university experts and professors from various universities decrying the legislation for many reasons, including the fact that as experts, they themselves were never consulted. But it's clear that this bill is passed because the community and the country, it feels like there needs to be improved regulation to protect young people online. However, again, legislation enacted without consultation with experts and or young people themselves kind of represents poor policy development. But for this focus of my research today, I'm going to talk about delve into the probable consequences of this legislation, which will be enacted later this year. So what I did was I looked for case studies of young people using TikTok for their grief expression. I did a TikTok video scrape using the hashtags RIP Mom, RIP Dad. I familiar with GitHub files and installing open source software. So I used some software, and the output was JSON files, which I then put into this analysis tool. I had about 195 RIP moms or RIP dads, and then 199 RIP moms. And then I overlapped a few with just RIPs. And I tried to keep the location to Australia using a brand new empty account. So that's my methodology. So I'm just going to share with you a couple of really interesting case studies that I found. This was a really fascinating TikTok where it was a young woman, and it was an Aboriginal young woman, and I kind of made that self-assessment from the icon imagery that was there and from the other accounts that were commenting. And it's an example of what I consider presencing, that is showing one is present at an event of grief, and as well as an example of grieving together with an extended families and cousin relationships, that particular cousin relationship, family relationship, and also a cultural relationship. And it's this moment of memorialization. So what it is, it's this video, and what it doesn't show any of the faces. It doesn't show doesn't go above, honestly, the knees, but it just goes around in the circle of the casket, and then does a little bit of a loop for a few seconds. And what she says in this point of view, I'm watching them close my dad's casket, realizing I won't get to hear his voice ever again or see him again. The text, ours, R.I.P. father. And so what's, I think, really interesting about this is, yes, her perspective on what's going on with her, but also the connections and the comments that happen, and the comments that she responds to. So she has someone whose account name is Aboriginal, etc., and knows this person specifically by name and says, it's all right, name. And that's kind of an example of grieving within a cultural family. And then another person mentions that they're watching their favorite uncle's casket closing, knowing that they're never going to be able to hear his beautiful voice again. And for those of you not in Australia, the term uncle in this context of an Aboriginal young woman's account presumably is related to someone in the Aboriginal community. So it's not just the fact that these young people are putting it out there and grieving externally, but also the fact that there's this connection, and what they may lose is this connection with this cultural connection with people. Especially when they live in remote areas, right? So there's a vast physical space of land, and TikTok is a place that's that gathering space. Another example was there's an that example was an Australian TikToker, and they had New Zealand followers, and I found this out because there's this little back and forth between them. So, which is interesting to think about. When there's Australia and New Zealand, we call it Australasia, and it's these two connected countries. They're two countries, but they have a very there's a lot of connection between the two of them, and so there is going to be a rift when one country has a particular legislation for young people on what they're allowed to do and be online with, and then the sister country does not, and especially so between Aboriginal cultural relationships. So another example I have is, this one was just really basic. When you meet someone who's passed away, you realize that this life is empty. That's all it wrote. That was just a black text for a couple of seconds. It was a woman in her early 20s, the account, and she's talking about losing her mother at 12 and dad at 13, and just the grief. But again, what's interesting is the responses. So there's a 13-year-old here shown saying, I lost my mother when I was 7 and have to lose someone that young is heartbreaking, but now I'm 13 and I can barely remember her. So it's really interesting, this intergenerational connection between maybe young adults, 18 or even teenagers who are grieving and that the young people that are interacting with them and seeing these responses, and that they're able, they're learning from the others that are older themselves, that it's okay to have this digital grief expression, and that is going to be removed. So that's another kind of another example of unintended consequences, as it were. So yeah, potential impact, really. When I was looking at all of the different accounts, I found there were 3 things that kept coming up to me. And then there were the core families. So within the different age siblings, you may have a 13-year-old and a 15-year-old. Now there's they're not going to be able to interact or connect with each other or keep tabs on each other on TikTok. And there's also this legislation may have the impact of young people may feel misunderstood within their family or any kind of authority figures. Then there's the extended family and cousin relationship of different ages. And I think, again, the potential impact is just the complex emotional work that young people are doing to process grief within an extended family. And that example, I think, of the 13-year-old who happened to be connecting with someone else online, I think might fit into that kind of cousin chat in a way, and no longer allows for that support network. And then other potential impact is that specifically for Indigenous youth and cultural families, there already, there's a cultural connection within grief. And so there's going to be, I expect there's going to be increased isolation during an already challenging emotional period. And then perhaps developing a resentment towards the government for this. So we will see what happens, this potentiality that's going to happen. But yeah, it's interesting. Australia is the first to do it in the world, so we'll see how it goes. But I'm excited for the future of this research. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Yes, we're the first, you kind of want to say, I hope we're the last, because it's been such a fraught thing that is obviously impacting. I mean, a lot of young people have come talking out about how this is actually really disenfranchising them. It's, cutting off their space of connection. And so, yeah, it's thank you for opening up that rabbit hole of discussion. So I'm going to pass on. We're going to have some questions at the end. So now I'm going to hand over to Shahee Ilyas, and he's going to be looking at mapping Ecogrief. So Shahee is a transdisciplinary designer and a PhD candidate at RMIT University in Melbourne, Australia. His work is exploring how data visualization on mobile media can address ecological grief and drive social change. Thank you.
Thank you, Larissa. Hi, I'm Shahee. I'm presenting a part of my ongoing research on mapping hashtag Ecogrief across TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram. Ecological grief is the emotional response to environmental degradation. We feel it when our landscapes change, when the birds stop singing, when our rivers stop flowing. It is the grief we feel for the loss of more than human. It is an emotion we all feel, though many of us don't have words to describe it. This is a collective emotion that shapes our societal consciousness as structures of feeling. They provide a framework for sense-making of complex and evolving shared experiences. Ecogrief as a hashtag on mobile media help us capture this emergent feeling, which we can study to examine our shared mourning rituals tied to ecological crisis. To understand these digital networks, I am drawing inspirations from the old practice of mapping stars. Just like the ancient constellation maps connected stars to form meaningful patterns, my visualizations show hashtag clusters functioning as temporary publics or sometimes more sustained publics forming around shared interests and concerns. On these visualizations, each platform acts as a unique viewpoint in our digital sky. As ancient stargazers interpreted celestial patterns differently based on their vantage point, each digital platform shapes how we see and experience ecogrief in distinct ways. Each platform generates their own social structures, influencing discourse through their specific affordances, user interfaces, and algorithms. We should also note that data visualizations are ideological. They are not neutral. They reveal hidden patterns in relationships and also reflect cultural and ideological conventions. By mapping hashtag networks, I aim to reveal structural dynamics of ecogrief discourse across platforms, how it emerges, spreads, and shifts within platform ecosystems. For this research, I scraped latest posts that contained the term ecogrief, whether used as a hashtag or mentioned within the content itself. For visualizations, I considered hashtags that appear together as linked or co-occurred. This allowed me to map how different ideas and topics within the ecogrief discourse were connected across various platforms. The hashtags are then visualized using a force-directed algorithm where hashtags that appear together more are pulled closer, while the less connected hashtags are moved further apart. Here are some of my initial visualizations. This is using data from September last year. I can see clusters appearing very clearly on Instagram. There are clusters or constellations forming around themes like mythology, zines, post-activism, and more. Even on Facebook, the clusters are distinct and the themes are very similar to Instagram. But the distances between the clusters are further apart. This could mean that the collaborations between Facebook communities are also further apart. But unlike on Instagram and Facebook, TikTok doesn't show clear clusters of hashtags. These are 3 snapshots of TikTok taken almost a month apart. They seem like they are forming a large single cluster and then disintegrating. This reflects the platform's algorithmic culture, where a concentrated set of popular hashtags emerges and fades away. Here are the data taken on the same days on Instagram. The clusters are very clear. This becomes more apparent when I compare the most popular hashtags on the platforms. On Instagram, the top hashtags remain the same, but on TikTok, they are dynamic even within a month. Across these snapshots, there's a clear pattern. On Instagram and Facebook, clusters remain clear and steady over time, revealing more sustained and thematic communities. By contrast, on TikTok, single clusters form and dissolve like meteor showers. These differences matter because they reveal how each platform shapes the expression of ecological grief. While TikTok's intense but fleeting bursts can gather large audiences around shared mourning in a short window, Instagram showed more stable and sustained long-term conversations. Understanding these dynamics reveal how platforms shape our structures of feeling, influencing how we grieve, connect, and act on ecological loss. Recognizing these patterns can help us better understand where meaningful conversations on ecogrief takes place and where we might need to rethink digital activism, especially in a world where grief can go viral and connections are both fleeting and transformative. Thank you.
Thank you, Shahee. Wonderful. As I said, we're going to leave the questions to the end. But there's something really interesting about so far thinking about that enhanced TikTok for like enhanced vernacular emotionalities and also for social change, which I think will be continuing on in the next 2 presentations. So next we have Soma Basu and she's looking at why do people cry on TikTok. And so Soma is a doctoral researcher at Tampere University in Finland. She has over 20 years experience in investigative journalism. She's a former fellow of Oxford Rutgers Institute and the Nordic Institute of Asian Studies at the University of Copenhagen. So thank you, Soma.
Thank you, everyone. I'll share my slides. Yeah, well, first of all, this research was like a one-off paper. This was one of the first articles that I wrote when I started my academic journey after journalism. And this is absolutely not related to my doctoral research, which is mainly on communal violence and also, mediation of, witnessing affective violence online. Yeah, it mainly originated during the COVID pandemic when I was stuck. University was closed because of COVID and also because of political instability in India at that point of time. And I kind of, dumped all my frustration into this paper when I was looking at the memes myself. And also I kind of, got exposed to the idea because I was looking at the memes, uh, not, looking at the crying memes by searching, the crying videos, but I was coming across a lot of what the online communities were calling cringe videos on Indian Instagram. Uh, and in the Indian government also banned TikTok in 2020 because of an ongoing geopolitical situation. So a lot of people from TikTok migrated to Instagram overnight and on YouTube and different platforms. There were a lot of homegrown apps in India, where they migrated to. And so this space, this was a very messy space back then. But then, I got to this topic by looking at the cringe videos and the entire politics behind what exactly do we call cringe is probably the crux of the paper. So within this, the entire constellation of sad videos or crying videos, I am specifically looking at videos in which, how social media users or artists, as they call themselves, these micro celebrities prefer to be identified as, use the tropes of a pining or jilted lover or a devoted son and try to effectuate a bond with the viewers as an attempt to build their personal brands. Also, that was after the COVID, after the demonetization move by the government, after the COVID, there was a lot of economic instability in the country. And, creating videos and getting, becoming viral, this has also emerged as a source of livelihood for innumerable people. In fact, there are villages, in India where where the major the way that the people earn money over there is by creating videos on YouTube. So they are YouTubers, and becoming a YouTuber has turned into a very serious profession, which is helping people build their lives. So this is also a story of emancipation. uh, so when I started, I came across this song Teri Pyari Pyari Do Akhiya, and it was by this influencer called Sagar Goswami. So as you can see in this video, you see a brick wall. The person, he comes from Jharkhand, which is, a state ridden in poverty. The brick wall is also symptomatic of his own economical position. A lot of people cannot put a plaster on the wall. They've just put, like a brick structure. They don't even have the money to paint the walls. So from whatever we see in the background, and not just a celebrity, we also get to know about the economic situation of the person, where he comes from, because there are a series of videos where he speaks to his family. He's kind of creating videos with his family members, creating video with his friend. So yeah, and then I kind of trace the entire trajectory, how this person has done in the last couple of years. So I started my research in 2019, and I followed him till 2022. So in these years, how he has risen to become a micro celebrity who gets invited to appear in weddings and perform, and also have photo shoots with other celebrities. Again, talking about the effect and the affect that they generate, the augments that these videos create. These videos, these crying videos, all of a sudden they became viral in India around 2019. And as you can see from the Google Trend map, this particular song "Teri Kya Pyari Pyari Do Akhiya" that he enacts, it was released way early in 2018, but it went viral only in 2019 because of the video that Sagar Goswami created on TikTok. So this kind of reveals an entire economy, how even in fact nowadays Bollywood songs also are produced in a way that they follow the similar formula, where their songs could be used in short streaming platforms. They could be used in these videos. They have become a very strategic tool for visibility and engagement, because the users, they find, they sympathize. The stories are mainly the similar tropes of a jilted lover, as I said, or someone who lost their sweetheart, not in the real life, but replicating, I mean, acting from the Bollywood movies, the sad hero, the tragic hero. A lot of people interact with them when they mock the videos, so there is a lot of emotional transaction. And this again raises a lot of question about, whether this is sad baiting or rage baiting, the conversations about the trend of core. And the aesthetic hierarchy is also something that I discuss in this article, because that got me really curious. Who decides what art is? So yeah, when we talk about sad baiting and rage baiting, it's mainly driven by, we know that social media is driven by emotions. In fact, display of strong emotion is the driving factor behind the entire industry of misinformation, disinformation. Outrage sells very well on social media, and this has a very long history of how certain ways of writing, certain ways of portraying, certain ways of performativity goes viral and gathers more engagement. Again, anger, fear, these of all the emotions, anger and fear, they also do very well on social media. But at the same time, I was more interested in sadness because it has, uh, uh, something of a more, it's more permanent perhaps, or it's more pervasive. But anyway, these artists have become, they have risen to this micro celebrity culture. For example, on the left side of the screen you see Savan. He's another Savan Mahali, who also creates these videos in which he cries like this. मुझे मम्मी पापा से बढ़कर कोई चीज नहीं है, मैं गरीब ही ठीक हूँ. Hey guys, be social में. So, he mainly creates videos on poverty, and that's because of that, he's also known as Garib Boy, hashtag Garib Boy Savan. Most of his videos are about, a sick mother, or, for whom he's not able to buy medicines because he doesn't have money, which is, again, it's a performance. It's not really, it's not real. So he's also known as Mother Man Savan. He has earned these nicknames. And then a spoof website, a parody website, which is called Reptiles of Kurla. Kurla is a name in Bombay, a name of a place in Bombay. They created this live chat with him where, people are interacting, love you, Mother Man, and so on. Again, with Sagar Goswami, there is a brand management company that he has hired, and these are very small firms in tier 3 towns in India, where it's, the branch management company actually operates out of a small cyber cafe, in these villages, who kind of, do the Photoshop work for him, or, manages his brand, or manages the invitations that he get. In these platforms, there is also, they also, I mean, these videos raise the questions about representation of masculinity again, because most of these videos follow the similar tropes of Bollywood, of a jilted lover, who has been rejected by a woman. But then a lot of users, give different kind of meanings to these videos. For example, one, the idea of men crying complicates the way that the Indians have seen masculinity, in the way that the Indian masculinity is portrayed in Indian culture. Also, gender normativity. So, the video on the right hand side, these are just two friends, influencers who are creating a video together. They have collaborated, but then their screenshot was taken, and then someone, in the comment section posted homophobic comments about them. On the left hand side, this is another influencer who's crying, and who's enacting a scene in which a pregnant woman is pleading, a villain not to kill her because she's pregnant. So, people have created this meme that, I am pregnant, and so on. And this brings, to this very interesting area of the politics of aesthetics, the meme culture and the parody pages where people constantly ascribe meaning, layer, these artifacts with different kind of meanings, be it a spoof, be it a parody, be it political implications. For example, on the bottom right, you see Arun Kumar, and his memes have been, screenshots have been taken. He was also crying on a Bollywood song, but then the screenshot was taken, and then the Prime Minister of India has been criticized here, or the right wingers in India, like this is Andhbhakt written in Hindi. Uh, and the text is Khabardar, jo mere Modi ji ko kuch kaha to, like, don't say anything against my prime minister. So yeah, these kind of, memes, but they also kind of, reveal a lot of class hierarchies. And as Ascot has said, that the crime videos of TikTok form a telematic embrace, and they offer a newer reading into the subjectivity and identity of these people. Tembeck has also said that this is, sort of a dramaturgy of every day that we see. And these videos were very interesting to me because they also reveal a lot of representational politics, social hierarchies, and discrimination about who decides, what is cringe and what is not. Because a lot of these people, and a lot of these people, they come from villages, and they are not, they haven't had the privilege of inculcating that high artistic sense, as they say. They are also ridiculed as chapri, which is a casteist slur in India. Uh, and so, the way that they portray themselves, the way that the historically invisibilized communities are now forced on the screen, making themselves, reclaiming their spaces, and visibilizing themselves, is something that was very interesting to me. Again, respectable behavior is something which is linked to caste and class privileges in India, and also elsewhere. So they also disrupt, this, what is acceptable or what is respectable, and emerge as a reaction, against the different kind of, uh, caste hierarchies and the caste politics that also enacts when we look at the videos, or when the way that we consume the videos, or the way that we produce the videos. Again, these videos are there is constant remediation, like old Bollywood songs are repurposed on TikTok and Instagram. And then there is appropriation, because these artifacts are also creating different kinds of meanings. They are not, it's not just what the artist has created, but then they are taken on and on, and they form a chain of newer meanings and newer hierarchies. They are intertextual. One meme, one video references to another, and often the messages echo into each other. And they are also intermedial, because different media forms like TikTok stitches and compilations are also found on YouTube. And it's the entire DIY culture which is helping people. This is a story of emancipation. The entire DIY culture is actually helping communities, kind of fight against the situation they are trapped in after COVID, and because of political instability. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Like, what a fascinating dive into not only gender performativities, but also class and the kind of empowering role that Instagram, because TikTok's not there anymore, can actually play. So we're getting some really interesting things thinking about affordances, and there's some, and somebody's put a question in the chat, which we'll come to after the last presentation. So I'll hand over now to Valentina. Proust. Nos queremos vivas. We want ourselves alive. Digital circulation of grief and feminist solidarity through protest anthems. So Valentina is a doctoral student at the Annenberg School for Communication at the University of Pennsylvania in USA. She researches media representation, collective memory, and social movements, focusing on feminist activism in Latin America and authoritarian legacies. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Hi, everyone. It's such a great pleasure to join you all here at this symposium. As I was already introduced, my name is Valentina Proust. I'm a doctoral student, a third-year doctoral student at the Annenberg School for Communication. And today I'll be presenting some snippets of the larger project that I've been working on during the last couple of years in the context of my doctoral studies. So to introduce my work, I'll provide some context on my research and previous writings. I've been exploring digital mourning as a tool for activists and social movements to navigate injuries inflicted by demonic powers and transform these experiences into forces for social change. More specifically, I've studied how feminist movements use protest anthems to mourn systemic gender violence and foster solidarity. Through cases like Un Violador en tu Camino from Chile, Quiet from the US, and Baroye from Iran, I examine how these songs express collective pain, challenge the patriarchal structures, and reinforce solidarity among women. For the project that I'll be presenting today, I focus specifically on Latin American feminist protest anthems, particularly those addressing feminicides. So I aim to explore how these songs articulate this social wound and how feminist collectives use them to build solidarity against extreme violence towards women. I look at protest anthems created by feminist activists and artists in Latin America that have been performed in-person protests and also shared on social media to examine their role in fostering feminist solidarity to address the prevalent gender violence of feminicides in the region. Specifically, the study examines the transformative potential of digital mourning activism in Latin American movements like Ni Una Menos, Not One Less, and as social media platforms become significant arenas for mourning and community building, this research aims to uncover the unique contributions of protest anthems to these dynamics. My theoretical framework views protests as public expressions of mourning, uniting communities through demonstration, marches, and performances of discontent. And in these spaces, collective traumas such as gender-based violence are collectively mourned, giving voice to this shared pain and fostering solidarity among the participants. While mourning is often seen as private, it can become also a collective act when shared by a community with a common wound. I focus on mourning as a public expression of grief that builds solidarity, drives transformation, and also seeking to achieve justice. In the anthems that I'm examining, the mourning is centered on feminicides, and I use the word feminicides as the closest translation of feminicidios, following Marcela Lagarde's work, who defines it not just as the murder of women by men, but also as a state crime, highlighting the institutional failures that normalize misogyny and endangers women's life. Music in protest powerfully expresses socio-political discontent, inspiring actions, uniting movements, and amplifying marginalized voices. Singing anthems in protest become a cry against wounds inflicted by demonic powers. Traditionally tied to mourning rituals, songs in demonstrations serve as a coded sonorous mean that galvanize collective responses to these injustices. So, through singing, communities can mourn cultural traumas, voice shared pain, and forge collective identity. Drawing from Meluti, this collective identity emerges from shared belonging and coordinated action. Sarah Ahmed's theory of affect further suggests that emotions tied to objects create bonds among individuals, fostering collectives. And protest anthems can circulate emotions of mourning, evoke memories, and when performed, transform individual grief into shared feelings. So these are two of the main questions that emerge when thinking about the project that I'm presenting today, and that I will try to answer through the rest of the presentation. First, how does sharing and circulating protest anthems denouncing feminicism and gender violence on social media can contribute to forming and expressing feminist solidarities? And second, how do users interact with the mourning message of these anthems, and how do they contribute to their continued circulation and emotional processing? I'm analyzing two Latin American feminist anthems that, at least in part, are protesting feminicides. Un violador en tu camino from Chile and Canción sin miedo from Mexico. Both were chosen for their online virality and significance within feminist collective, and they have been widely performed in protest and adapted on social media. Due to time constraints, I won't play the videos of the songs, but I've included a QR code so you can access them on YouTube later today. Overall, my project has two sections. The first one, which is the one that I began with during this project, examines the original videos on YouTube and their comment sections to explore feminist solidarity networks and the emotional resonance of these anthems. And the second one, that is the one that I'm focusing on during this presentation, specifically centers on TikTok users and how they reinterpret and engage with the songs in their own content production. As I was telling, I was studying the comments on YouTube related to the songs when I noticed that the content that is usually shared is typically just the official version of the songs or the most famous performance of these songs. However, when looking at the YouTube Shorts section, I noticed that users were doing more than just that. They were actively engaging in new ways of consuming and creating content related to the songs. And that is when I went to TikTok to see what was happening there. So in my research, I conducted an annotated analysis of 300 TikTok videos, which I found using hashtags related to the anthems and their original performers. While some of these videos simply share the original performances, just as we see on YouTube, these are just a minority. The vast majority demonstrate how users actively engage with the anthems, incorporating their creativity and personal expression. This highlights that these songs are not just being consumed, but they're being lived, reinterpreted, and made deeply personal by those who are sharing them. One of the most striking patterns I observed was how many users were recording simple covers, singing directly into the camera with raw emotions. Their facial expressions alone convey grief, turning the songs into a personal cry of mourning. Others go a step further, crafting full performances that visually reinforce the message of the songs, and many use, for example, makeup to mark the wounds of the gender violence on their own bodies, creating a striking visual impact. Through the video transitions, editing techniques, they are manipulating the pacing and aesthetics, mirroring the urgency and intensity of the protest performance. And another powerful appropriation is the modification of the lyrics. For example, in Canción sin miedo, there is a section that names feminicide victims, and some TikTok users are replacing the names of the persons that are naming the song with the victims from their own community. So these are names that they know personally, names that hold a weight in their specific context. And this adaptation localizes the song's meaning, making it not just a general anthem against gender violence, but a personal and communal act of remembrance. And beyond individual performances, many users also incorporate protest footage, integrating clips from Ni Una Menos marches and other feminist mobilizations. This visually reinforces the idea that these songs are not just about personal grief, but about collective mourning, about a shared struggle that extends beyond anyone's personal experience. Finally, many TikTok creators often overlay feminist messages on their videos, going beyond the lyrics of the original songs. So they can insert their own voices and perspective about the topic. And these messages emphasize specific demands, highlighting ongoing injustices, and ensure that the anthems continue to evolve as living documents of feminist resistance. Through these acts of engagement, we can see that these anthems are not just like static. They cannot remain just in the original version. They're continuously being reinterpreted, adapted, and circulated in ways that sustain feminist solidarities and keep the memory of the victims alive. TikTok as a platform becomes then a crucial space where individual grief and activism can emerge, turning mourning into a force that continues to push for justice and seeking for change. And just to sum up with this presentation, as I've been discussing through this short presentation, the circulation of protest anthems denouncing feminicides and gender violence is more than spreading a message. It also transforms mourning into action. Shared on social media, individual grief then becomes collective, and each cover, reinterpretation, and adaptation reinforces feminist solidarities by keeping the victims' memories alive and making mourning an active mobilizing force. Social media acts as a digital archive of feminist grief, enabling both witnessing and participation in collective remembrance. Users then engage with these anthems in personal ways, for example, singing as a catharsis, incorporating protest footage, or adding text to amplify the feminist message of the songs. And in this way, mourning becomes resistance and a demand for justice. A key aspect of this circulation is the contextualization, as I was mentioning, for example, by adapting the lyrics to include the names of the feminicide victims in their own countries. Users are highlighting both the universality of gender violence, but also the specificity of the local struggles. This reinforces global feminist networks, fostering solidarity across borders. And beyond protests, these anthems help process grief, turning pain into strength. Mourning here is not just about the remembrance, but also about transformation, fueling activism and pushing for change. And ultimately, the ongoing circulation of these songs show how music, activism, and digital culture intersect to sustain the feminist struggles. Mourning then is not just an endpoint, but a force that drives resistance and reimagines justice. And here at the end, I included some of the references that I mentioned in the presentation, and also I included the reference of some of the articles that I already published related to the digital mourning and also the presence of these protest anthems. Thank you so much.
Muchas gracias. Thank you, Valentina. So wonderful. I love the way that you were connecting. I mean, we know that hope and grief are companions, and I love the way that, you know, you're talking about mourning as that transformative collective action. And it really is that hope is a strategy, and also it's a cultivated capability, isn't it? Where you can actually, and this is what they're really doing. It's absolutely so inspiring. So thank you.